He who has awakened to the self knows that birth and death are but passing shadows. Marcus Aurelius. The body comes and goes, but awareness remains. Journey beyond death, identity, and form to discover what you truly are. This is the doorway to peace, the realization that consciousness was never born and therefore can never end. Have you ever wondered who you truly are beyond the illusions of birth and death? What if the you think you are has never been born and will never die? In this cinematic journey, we reveal the ultimate truth of the self, merging ancient wisdom, modern science, and spiritual awakening for total inner transformation. Before the first heartbeat echoed in the womb of time, you already were. Before the last breath leaves your body, you will remain. The screen fades in from black, slow, cosmic, eternal. A single ray of light pierces the void, scattering into infinite reflections, and a voice, soft yet infinite, whispers through the silence. What if everything you think you are is only a dream the universe is having through you? We spend our lives clinging to a timeline: birth, youth, success, decay, death, as though these are the immutable coordinates of what it means to exist. But what if this timeline is not the story of your life, but a stage where consciousness briefly forgets its own infinity? You see, most of us believe we entered life at birth and will exit it at death. But the sages of every civilization, from the Vedas to Zen monasteries, from the mystics of the desert to the quantum philosophers of today, have whispered a different truth. You were never born, and you will never die. This isn't a poetic exaggeration. It is a radical shift in perception. Because the moment you awaken to the self, the real self, you discover that life and death are merely the ebb and flow of a single eternal ocean. You are not the wave that rises and falls. You are the water itself, the awareness through which every wave arises. Let's pause here and feel into that, not intellectually, but experientially. You are sitting, listening, breathing. Thoughts come and go. Emotions ripple through you. Even your sense of identity, your name, your age, your story is constantly shifting, isn't it? But there is something that does not change, something silent, vast, and aware. The witness behind the motion of your life. That silent awareness, that which observes the birth of a thought and the death of another, has never been born. It cannot die. It simply is. In the modern world, we've been trained to define ourselves by form, by the body, by achievements, by social labels. We polish the surface and forget the essence. But beneath the body that ages, beneath the emotions that surge and fade, beneath the personality that performs and protects, there is a presence, untouched, ageless, unshakable. That presence is you. You can feel it right now if you close your eyes. It's not mystical or abstract. It's the stillness that remains when you stop chasing thoughts. It's the quiet knowing that you are aware of being aware. This realization is not escapism, it's liberation. Because when you see that you were never truly born, you also see that you cannot truly die. Death then becomes not an ending, but a transition, the doorway the self walks through, unchanging, unafraid. And life becomes not a desperate attempt to cling to moments, but a sacred opportunity to experience the infinite through the finite. You begin to live differently. You move through time, but you are no longer owned by it. You play the game of life, health, love, money, ambition, but without the panic of loss or the hunger for validation, because you realize the self was never in danger.
Imagine a candle flame inside a vast mirror hall. The mirror reflects endless lights, hundreds, thousands, but the flame itself remains singular. Each reflection thinks it is separate, fighting to survive, afraid to fade. But all along, it was one flame, one consciousness wearing countless faces. You are that flame. And this human life is one reflection, a temporary expression of your eternal nature. When we begin to sense this truth, our entire perception of existence changes. The purpose of life is no longer to become something. It is to remember what we already are. That remembrance transforms everything. Health becomes not a struggle to perfect the body, but a devotion to honoring the divine vessel of awareness. Relationships become not contracts of need, but sacred mirrors reflecting the infinite to itself. Wealth becomes not accumulation, but the joyful circulation of energy. And even the pursuit of success becomes less about proving worth and more about expressing the boundless creativity of the self through action. But to awaken to this requires courage, the courage to question the story of me, because ego is terrified of dissolution. It clings to identity, to history, to boundaries. It whispers, if I am not this body, this name, the story, then who am I? And that is precisely where awakening begins, in the trembling silence after that question. You were never the thoughts running in your mind. You were the screen they appeared upon. You were never the roles you played, parent, leader, dreamer, healer. You were the light behind each mask. You were never the chapters of your story. You were the blank page upon which the story was written. When you grasp this not merely as an idea, but as reality, fear dissolves, grief transforms, ambition purifies. Because you are no longer seeking eternity. You realize you are eternity. This is the truth at the heart of every sacred teaching, from the Upanishads' whisper of Tat Fum Asi, you are that, to Christ's before Abraham was, I am, to the Zen master's silent smile, all pointing to one realization. The self is not born and thus cannot die. So as we begin this journey together, let us drop for a moment the weight of our stories, the past, the labels, the fears. Let us breathe in the possibility that what we call life is a dance of the eternal wearing human form, that the body is not the prison of consciousness, but its most beautiful instrument. And the goal is not to escape the world, but to see the divine shimmering through it. You were never born. You will never die. You are the timeless awareness through which both birth and death appear, like clouds drifting across the infinite sky of your being. And as we step into this exploration,
we'll uncover not only the mystical truths of existence, but how this realization transforms every area of life, from how you love to how you lead, from how you create to how you let go. Because when you realize you are not the fleeting wave, but the ocean itself, you begin to live with power, peace, and presence beyond imagination.
The illusion is not that we die. The illusion is that we were ever separate from what cannot die. The human mind lives between opposites, birth and death, success and failure, gain and loss, light and shadow. We organize our world by contrast, and yet beneath these apparent polarities lies a field of unity, an awareness untouched by change. This is the domain of the self, not the self you think you are, but the self that simply is. The illusion of the personal I. At the root of all human confusion sits one great assumption, that there is a separate me living inside this body, controlling, deciding, suffering, and striving. But let's look closely. Can you find this I? If you look within, beyond thought, beyond memory, you discover it's unfindable. The I is not an entity, it's an activity. It's the movement of thought claiming ownership over experience. The real you, the witnessing consciousness, is not an object within experience, but the space in which experience happens. In psychology, we call it meta-awareness. In neuroscience, it's been linked to the quiet rhythm of the default mode network when the mind relaxes its grip on narrative identity. In spirituality, it's the eternal self, the Atman, the Tao, the I Am. Different languages, one essence. You are the awareness of thought, not the thinker of thoughts. The seen and the unseen. The physical world feels real. Our senses paint a vivid image of solidity and separation. But modern science has revealed what mystics always intuited, that this solidity is an illusion of perception. Matter, when examined closely, dissolves into vibration, and vibration into energy, and energy into a field of probability, a dance of potential observed into being by consciousness itself. You are not in the universe. The universe is in you, arising within your field of awareness, just as dreams arise within the sleeping mind. The Stoics called this field logos, the organizing intelligence pervading everything. Hermeticism calls it the all. The Taoists call it the way that cannot be named. And the quantum mystics speak of the observer effect, where the act of perception brings reality into focus. When you see this clearly, you stop trying to control every wave in the ocean and instead begin to surf its rhythm. You stop fighting life and begin to flow with the intelligence that animates it. Control versus surrender. The ego's favorite game is control. It builds fortresses of plans, identities, and expectations, hoping to outsmart impermanence. But control is a form of fear wearing discipline's mask. Surrender is not weakness, it's alignment. It is the recognition that you were never the doer, that life has always been living itself through you. When you surrender, you don't become passive, you become profoundly efficient, because your actions now flow from intuition, not anxiety, from coherence, not conflict. The Zen masters say, before enlightenment, chomp wood.
The layers of the self. Ancient Vedic philosophy describes the human being as 5 layers, koshas, sheaths covering the luminous self. Annamaya kosha, the physical body built of food and matter. Pranamaya kosha, the energy body vibrating with life force. Manomaya kosha, the mental body, home of thoughts and emotion. Vijnanamaya kosha, the wisdom body, intuitive understanding. Anandamaya kosha, the bliss body, radiant presence. Beyond all of these shines the self, pure awareness, untouched by decay. When modern psychology speaks of integrated consciousness, it echoes this ancient map. Wholeness arises when all layers are harmonized around awareness, when body, mind, and spirit become instruments of one song. The role of suffering. If you were never born and can never die, why do you suffer? Because suffering is the friction created when the infinite self identifies with the finite form. It's the discomfort of wearing clothes too tight for your true size. Pain itself is not the enemy. It is the messenger of misalignment. It asks, where are you pretending to be smaller than what you are? Every emotional wound, rejection, failure, grief is the divine invitation to remember your boundlessness, to wake up once again from the dream of limitation. This is why the mystics bless their suffering. It's not masochism, it's mastery. They've learned to transmute pain into awareness, to use contrast as a mirror for awakening. The eternal witness. The body changes, the thoughts change, even your sense of identity evolves from child to adult to elder. But through every stage, there is something constant, the knower of the change. That witness, silent, luminous, observing all, is your true nature. Imagine watching a movie. The characters rise and fall, love and die. You may cry, laugh, feel deeply, but you remain untouched as the watcher. Similarly, the self experiences the movie of life without ever being harmed by its drama. This realization brings peace, not the peace of numbness, but the peace of unshakable clarity. Because even when storms arise, you know you are the sky, not the storm. Integration of dimensions. When you live from this awareness, every dimension of life begins to realign. Health becomes the art of energy management, not vanity. Emotions become teachers, not tyrants. Intellect becomes a tool of clarity, not confusion. Character becomes the expression of inner coherence. Spirituality becomes everyday presence. Love becomes recognition of self in another. Parenting becomes guiding another spark of eternity with grace. Social life becomes communion, not competition. Finance becomes flow, not fear. Career becomes calling, not compulsion. Quality of life becomes gratitude, not grasping. Experience becomes transfer.
In every myth, the soul remembers its own reflection. The ancients never taught truth through definitions. They taught it through stories, because the infinite cannot be reduced to an argument. It must be felt. And so through myth, the invisible becomes visible. Let us step into a few such stories, not as fiction, but as mirrors of your own awakening. the story of the dreamer and the mirror. Once there was a dreamer who entered a hall of mirrors. Each mirror reflected a different version of her, a warrior, a scholar, a lover, a wanderer, a child. The dreamer moved from mirror to mirror, forgetting she was the one watching. One day, she stumbled upon a mirror that did not reflect anything at all, only light, endless, radiant light. Startled, she leaned closer, and as she did, her reflection disappeared completely. Only the awareness of seeing remained. In that moment, she awakened. She realized she had never been the warrior or the wanderer. She had been the light bouncing between the mirrors all along. This is you. You are the consciousness looking into 1,000 mirrors of experience, but never once have you been contained by any of them. Every identity, parent, lover, leader, seeker, is a temporary reflection. When one shatters, it's not the end, it's the revelation of the light behind it. The parable of the alchemist. In another time, there was an alchemist obsessed with transmuting lead into gold. He spent decades perfecting formulas, studying stars, whispering prayers into fire. But nothing worked. One night, exhausted, he fell asleep at his desk. He dreamt that a luminous being appeared and said, "The secret is not to change the lead. It is to realize that it was gold all along." When he awoke, something shifted. He looked at the dull gray metal before him and saw, for the first time, that it shone with a faint, eternal light. The miracle was not transformation, it was perception. And so it is with us. We spend lifetimes trying to become better, purer, enlightened. But awakening is not becoming something else. It is recognizing that what you have been seeking is what has always been looking. The lead of ego was never separate from the gold of spirit. Only the eyes were closed. The fisherman and the ocean. A fisherman stood by the shore each morning, throwing his net into the waves. He prayed for a great catch, enough to fill his boat, his belly, his heart. One day, as he cast his net, a stranger appeared, a radiant man with eyes like still water. The stranger asked, "Why do you search for fish when the ocean itself is within you?" The fisherman laughed. "If that were true, why would I be hungry?" The man smiled and touched the fisherman's chest. In that instant, the waves froze in silence, and the fisherman saw. The sea was not outside him, it was flowing through him. Every droplet of the universe was rising and falling within his own awareness. He dropped his net, bowed to the horizon, and wept. We too spend our lives casting nets of desire for success, validation, security. But when the realization dawns that we are the very ocean of consciousness, we no longer beg for drops. We live as the tide itself. The candle and the wind. In a monastery on a mountain, a monk tended a single candle that burned before a statue of light. He believed it was his duty to keep the flame alive, for it represented the divine. One night, a fierce windstorm swept through the temple. Terrified, the monk shielded the candle with his body, but the flame went out. In despair, he cried, "I have failed you, my lord." But from the darkness came a whisper, "You fool, I was not the flame, I am the wind." In that instant, the monk understood. The divine is not in what we preserve, but in what cannot be extinguished. Life takes form as the candle, fragile, beautiful. Death comes as the wind, fierce, inevitable. But consciousness is the invisible fire behind both, the source that burns neither and loses nothing. The cosmic story, the universe awakening to itself. Imagine this. Before time began, there was only awareness, pure, silent, infinite. But even infinity longed to know itself. And so it dreamed of separation. It created galaxies and stars, atoms and oceans, hearts and eyes, through which it could see itself anew. Every soul, every creature, every moment of birth and death is the one exploring its own reflection. You are the universe awakening to itself through human form. When you feel awe, love, or sorrow, the cosmos is tasting its own depth. When you create art, or build empires, or forgive an enemy, that is God rediscovering its own limitless nature. This is not metaphor. It is the architecture of existence. The one becomes many to remember it was never two. Symbolism and the self. These myths are not escapist fables. They are encrypted wisdom maps of the human psyche. The dreamer represents consciousness, itself. The mirrors are identities and experiences. The alchemist is the seeker, and the gold is awareness. The fisherman is humanity, endlessly searching for what it already is. The monk and the wind teach surrender, the end of attachment to form. And the cosmic dream reminds us that every me is God's own disguise. In modern psychological terms, these stories reflect the integration of the conscious and unconscious, the journey from egoic separation to transpersonal unity. In the language of mysticism, it is the path from illusion, Maya, to realization, moksha. In everyday terms, it is the shift.
Enlightenment is not an escape from life. It is the deepest participation in it. When we awaken to the truth that we were never born and will never die, life does not disappear into abstraction. Instead, it becomes radiantly ordinary. Each breath, each interaction, each decision shimmers with a quiet holiness. Awakening is not an ending. It is an integration. It is bringing infinite awareness into the very heartbeat of your human experience. Let's explore how this understanding reshapes the 12 dimensions of conscious living, not as philosophy, but as practice. 1. Health and fitness. The body as a temple of awareness. When you realize you are not the body, you paradoxically begin to honor the body more deeply, because it is no longer you, it is sacred equipment, a divine instrument through which awareness expresses itself. Exercise becomes prayer. Nutrition becomes reverence. Rest becomes communion with life itself. You stop punishing your body for not fitting ideals and start listening to it as a messenger of balance. You treat movement as meditation and stillness as medicine. You realize longevity is not about escaping death. It's about amplifying life's clarity in every cell. Emotional life, mastery through awareness. Emotions are waves of energy, visceral signals revealing where you're still identifying with form. Fear whispers, "You've forgotten your infinity." Anger says, "You're trying to control what was never yours." Sadness murmurs, "You're mourning an illusion of loss." Instead of suppressing emotions or drowning in them, you learn to witness them. You become the still ocean, observing its waves. The practice? Next time an emotion rises, don't label it or resist it. Simply breathe and say, "This too is arising in me, but it is not me." Instantly, space opens. That space is freedom. Intellectual life, clarity beyond thought. The awakened mind is not anti-intellectual, it is clear. It uses the intellect as a tool, not a tyrant. You stop over-identifying with concepts and opinions and begin using reason as an expression of awareness. Curiosity replaces judgment. Humility replaces certainty. Learning becomes less about accumulating data and more about remembering wisdom. When the mind serves consciousness, intelligence turns into insight. Knowledge becomes knowing. Character. Integrity as alignment. Integrity means wholeness. When you know yourself as consciousness, you can no longer betray your nature. You act not from fear or performance, but from inner coherence. Courage arises naturally because you understand nothing real can be lost. Discipline stops being punishment, it becomes devotion. Authenticity ceases to be rebellion, it becomes your default vibration. True strength is not control, it's the quiet certainty that truth is its own protection. Spirituality, everyday enlightenment. The ultimate spirituality is not performed on a mountaintop. It's practiced in traffic, in conversation, in chaos. Each moment is a doorway to the infinite when met with presence. Meditation is no longer a task. It is the natural resting of awareness in itself. You begin to see prayer in laughter, ritual in breathing, and divinity in dishes washed with mindfulness. The sacred and the ordinary merge until no distinction remains. Love and relationships, seeing the self in another. When you recognize yourself as consciousness, you begin to recognize everyone else as that same consciousness. Love ceases to be attachment and becomes recognition. You don't need someone to complete you. You meet them to reflect your own infinity. Conflict softens because you stop demanding that others fill your voids. You relate not from hunger, but from wholeness. Even heartbreak transforms because you see
Social life, authentic connection. When you live as awareness, you stop performing for approval. Conversations become deeper, silences more comfortable. You listen not to reply, but to feel. You speak not to impress, but to express truth. Boundaries emerge naturally, not as defense, but as clarity of vibration. You no longer seek crowds, you attract resonance. This transforms community into communion. Financial life, conscious abundance. Money is condensed energy, a symbol of flow. When you detach from fear and scarcity, you stop chasing wealth and start channeling it. You earn through service, invest through intuition, spend with awareness. Prosperity becomes spiritual hygiene, a balanced current of giving and receiving. You realize abundance is not how much you have, but how freely energy moves through you. Career, purpose, and presence. Work becomes worship when you remember who's working. You're not laboring for status or survival, but expressing the universe's creativity through your craft. Every email, every design, every conversation is a brushstroke on the canvas of existence. Leadership turns from authority to authenticity, from control to clarity. You no longer chase success, you embody significance. You don't have a mission, you are one. Quality of life, joy as baseline. Joy is not something you pursue. It is what remains when resistance ends. Gratitude becomes your natural perception. The simplest things, morning light, clean water, shared laughter, become gateways to the infinite. You stop measuring your life by quantity of experiences and start measuring by depth of presence. Happiness fluctuates. Joy abides. Because joy is not pleasure, it is participation in reality as it is. Life experience. Transformation without trauma. When you live as consciousness, you no longer fear change. Each challenge becomes a teacher. Each ending becomes a portal. Pain still visits, but it no longer defines you. Because you've remembered, you are the awareness in which experiences rise and fade, not the experiences themselves. Transformation, then, is not forced, it's inevitable, like the blooming of a flower that no longer resists the sun. Practical reflection practices. Here are 3 gentle ways to live this truth daily. The witness pause. Several times a day, stop and ask, what is aware of? You are not walking toward eternity. You are eternity, walking through time. The screen fades again into cosmic silence. The same light that opened our journey now glows brighter, not above you, but within. The music swells like a memory you've always known. And in that stillness, something dawns. The search is over, because what you were seeking was never in the future. It was always here, as you. The return home. All paths lead to this moment, the remembrance of the self beyond birth and death. Not as a concept, but as the living pulse of awareness that is reading these very words. Every question of purpose, fear, or identity collapses into one luminous truth. You are the witness behind it all. From that knowing, life becomes an unfolding miracle. Not because circumstances are perfect, but because your perception has become pure. You no longer ask, what will happen to me?
You begin to ask, what wants to happen through me? This is the sacred shift from survival to service, from anxiety to artistry, from time-bound identity to timeless participation. The death that liberates. When sages speak of dying before you die, they are not predicting tragedy. They are inviting awakening. It means letting the false self dissolve while the body still breathes. It means allowing the story of me, the fears, the masks, the endless comparisons, to burn away in the quiet fire of awareness. And when that inner funeral is complete, what remains is not emptiness, but freedom. Death no longer frightens you because you've already walked through it, not as an ending, but as unveiling. You see that what dies is the temporary costume, and what lives is the naked light of consciousness dancing in every form. The infinite in the finite. To live awakened is not to float away from the world. It is to feel the infinite pulse through the finite moment, to taste divinity in morning coffee, to hear eternity in the laughter of a child, to see the cosmos reflected in a stranger's eyes. You no longer need grand experiences to touch the sacred. Every breath becomes an altar. Every act of kindness becomes prayer. Every challenge becomes a teacher. You live simply, but profoundly, because you are no longer living for something. You are living as something, as awareness embodied, as love in motion, the self in the mirror of the world. Look around. Every person you meet is another face of the same infinity. Every soul is an echo of your own essence, playing a different note in the grand symphony of being. When you recognize this, compassion becomes automatic. Judgment fades, because who is left to judge? Forgiveness becomes natural, because you understand. It was all consciousness, exploring itself through contrast. The wars of the ego dissolve in the peace of perspective. And even amidst chaos, you carry an inner serenity that cannot be stolen, because the world no longer mirrors your fears. It mirrors your freedom, living the truth. So what does it really mean, to live knowing you were never born and will never die? It means you stop measuring life by its length and start measuring it by its depth. You no longer live from the panic of not enough time, but from the timelessness of this moment is everything. You still build dreams, but you are not possessed by them. You still feel emotions, but you are not enslaved by them. You still love, but you do not lose yourself in love, because you know, beyond all form, you and the beloved were never two. This understanding does not make you indifferent. It makes you infinitely intimate with existence, because you no longer look at life from the outside. You are life. Look.
The diamond of presence. There is a kind of power that comes not from control or ambition, but from presence. It is quiet. It does not shout. It radiates. That power arises when you are aligned with what is, when your doing flows from being, when your thoughts bow to awareness, when your will harmonizes with the divine rhythm of life. In this state,
Success is effortless. Relationships are real. Creativity becomes pure channeling. You are not pushing life anymore. You are partnering with it. You are no longer in time. Time moves within you. A reflection exercise. Sit quietly. Close your eyes. Let the noise of thought settle like dust in water. And silently ask, what remains when I stop imagining myself? Do not answer, just feel. In that stillness, you will sense the presence that has always been here, before the first heartbeat, beyond the last breath. That presence is what you truly are. Everything else is a costume borrowed by eternity for the sake of play. The call to remember. This is your invitation, not to escape life, but to remember the self while living it fully. To walk through the marketplace with the same serenity as the monk. To build empires while knowing they are made of sand. To love passionately, knowing nothing real can ever end. To wake each morning and whisper, I am awareness, playing as a person, and today I will play beautifully. This changes everything, not because it gives you new things, but because it returns you to what can never be taken away. The eternal moment. You were never born. You will never die. You are the silent witness, watching suns ignite and fade, watching lifetimes rise and fall, watching yourself dreaming as 1,000 beings in 1,000 worlds. And when all dreams dissolve, you remain, unchanged, unbroken, unending. That is the ultimate truth of the self. That is the freedom hiding behind every breath you take. Final words, the cinematic closing. The screen fades to gold.